Punk Revolution now. Today we are going to be reviewing a very special, interesting collaboration album. Danny Brown, one of my favorite rappers of all time. XXX, I've put on my list of best albums of all time. Atrocity Exhibition is freaking amazing. Everything Danny Brown touches is amazing. He's a freaking genius. And JPEGMAFIA, another rapper that some of his albums he's released in the past few years have been actually some of my very favorite albums of the past few years. All My Heroes Are Cornballs, I freaking think is a phenomenal record. LP was freaking awesome. JPEGMAFIA is such a cool, unique, interesting rapper. Amazing production. Just two weirdos. Danny Brown is a weirdo. JPEGMAFIA is a weirdo. Both maestros in the genre of experimental hip-hop, not afraid to get wacky, crazy, creative with experimental hip-hop, releasing a collaboration record titled Scaring the Farming Tools. I'm not gonna actually say the H word because I have ladies who watch my freaking videos, and if they hear me say the H word, they are going to unsubscribe, so nope. Maybe I'm too scared to say it. I don't care. We're saying Scaring the Farming Tools because that's how the thing is, a farming tool. So without further ado, enough of that exciting, interesting collaboration. Of course, I am intrigued. Of course, every nerd who enjoys hip-hop is intrigued. So let's go ahead and start by taking a look at the album cover. So right off the bat, this album cover to me looks like it's a vintage poster to like a really epic, fun movie involving ladies and drugs and crime and running from the police and ladies. Well, it just kind of looks like Danny Brown and JPEGMAFIA are about to be freaking epic clowns who are going to run around the city and get into all sorts of shenanigans. It looks like fun. It looks exciting. I am intrigued. I will say, one thing that stands out to me on this cover off the bat is that JPEGMAFIA really does kind of just take the spotlight with he's like in the center. He's like the star of the album cover, and that's fine. But when you actually open up this album and listen through it from start to finish, it does kind of give the impression that it is more of a JPEGMAFIA album featuring Danny Brown than it is a Danny Brown JPEGMAFIA collaboration. Just want to get that, just out front and center. Not exactly sure how that ended up happening. JPEGMAFIA is producing this record, and JPEGMAFIA's production style is very distinct. It is distinctly like JPEGMAFIA, because when I'm listening to JPEGMAFIA, I'm really focusing like 50-50 on the rapping and the production, because JPEGMAFIA's production is so fascinating. It's such an essential part of the listening experience, while maybe with Danny Brown, it's more like 70% focused on the rapping and 30% on the production. Danny Brown's beat choices are amazing. I just think Danny Brown is just such a funny, hilarious rapper. I prefer to think more about the Danny Brown vocals than the beats, while JPEGMAFIA is such a phenomenal producer. I'm more focused on his unique production style. So if you have an album produced by JPEGMAFIA, which just gives this overwhelming JPEGMAFIA vibe from start to finish, you have JPEGMAFIA doing the majority of the rapping on this album, you have JPEGMAFIA front and center on the cover, and you have, frankly, in the mixing, JPEGMAFIA's vocals are quite clear. You can understand every single word coming out of JPEGMAFIA's mouth, and Danny Brown, his vocals just aren't as clear. That his vocals sound overall quieter. I don't know if that was like an intentional thing with the mixing choice. I know sometimes it's hard to get someone's voice loud. It's not as easy, I know when you're mixing, it's not as easy as just taking the voice and turning it up. I know that there's like different frequencies that overlap, so maybe they just weren't able to successfully mix this album to get Danny Brown's vocals to be as clear. But long story short, you put it all together, to me, it's more of a JPEGMAFIA album featuring Danny Brown, which in theory should be exciting. If I'm seeing, oh my god, I really like JPEGMAFIA, and he's featuring one of my favorite rappers ever, that to me is an album I'm gonna be super excited about. But when you frame the album as a collaboration and you get in and it's more of a JPEGMAFIA album featuring Danny Brown, even though that should be a net positive that you're really happy and excited about, there's still kind of a little bit of disappointment as you process. This is not exactly what I was expecting, but that doesn't matter. It really shouldn't matter, because it really is an extremely just like the album cover is going to make you think, it's an extremely fun album where it sounds like JPEGMAFIA and Danny Brown are having a lot of fun through the whole thing, so there's a lot to appreciate. And I will say as a side note that Danny Brown did recently announce that he is going to be starting a stint at rehab, so I don't want to, speculate too much about what's going on. I obviously wish the best for him. He's a genius. I hope that rehab is very helpful for him, but just kind of thinking about the implications of that rehab announcement, that might kind of help explain why JPEGMAFIA had to take the forefront in leading this creative effort and did more of the rapping rather than maybe JPEGMAFIA being a narcissist. I don't think that's necessarily the case. So as I've said, with JPEGMAFIA's production style, I do think that is, to me, one of the things that have made him stand out as a superstar in hip-hop in the past 5-10 years. I've talked about All My Heroes Are Cornballs, LP. If you listen to these albums, of course, you're going to be blown away by the production, and JPEGMAFIA, as the producer of this record, is going to continue doing exactly that to blow you away. I am a huge fan of the second track on this album, Step a Pig. Like, that's going to be a track that I'm going to be returning to a lot. That, like, dun, 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 dun. I can't explain it, just like the rhythm is like real. It's like jagged and just kind of like it like cuts into your soul every. I love the production. I love the percussion in the production. The percussion, it's very tinny and kind of metallic and sort of like it sounds. It's like he must have done some weird things on the snare, like. It almost like pops. And like, I don't know, like throughout the whole album, it's really, really unique, interesting percussion choices. And even though I'm a little disappointed Danny Brown's vocals are a little quieter and harder to understand, there is some like kind of a very mild distorted effect on Danny Brown's vocals that just sounds so cool. It's just giving it like a tinge of like sort of like an abrasive industrial feel, but not too much, because the production, I don't want to say it's industrial. It's a lot more playful and wild and weird and wacky than anything else. And Danny Brown, of course, he's gonna have some very inappropriate sexual lyrics, which we all love. JPEGMAFIA is gonna have a bunch of nerdy, weird, political. Someone who's just JPEGMAFIA is clearly a dude who spends a lot of time online. That's gonna be coming through in the lyrics, as always with JPEGMAFIA. The track Scaring the Hose is, it's very fun and catchy and interesting. The scaring... Dang it, I said it, didn't I? Scaring the farming tools. Scaring the farming tools is definitely a trope that's making fun of the fact that, like, a lot of abrasive experimental hip-hop, you put it on in the car, and the hot girl you're trying to impress is gonna be like, no, I'm too much of a dumb woman to understand. And then the 15-year-old boy who put on Death Grips is like, ha ha ha, they'll never understand the true experimental thingies, even though obviously lots of women like experimental abrasive music. But anyways, so, it's kind of like the Scaring the Hose thing is kind of like, it's like half joking, half serious. Like, we're making fun of our fan base for being nerds who think they're scary people because they listen to some of the most popular music coming out right now. But they also are kind of like serious in terms of like they are playing into that trope. Like the song "Scaring the Hose" has a sample where it's just like a really messy, kind of out of tune, like saxophone solo on loop with some weird clapping and stuff. It sounds exactly like, the Danny Brown has lyrics about like turn that off and put on some poppy stuff on the radio, because that's what the farming tools want to hear. Apparently, it's a misogynistic term, but there's clearly some self-awareness here. They're kind of making fun of people who would be dorky enough to say that sort of misogynist trope rather than necessarily endorsing it, while still playing along with the trope in the weird production and the quirky lyrics, etc. And there really are just countless self-aware, funny, creative, stimulating, weird, interesting, quirky, just thought-provoking choices, very creative choices from start to finish made throughout this album, both in the production and in the lyrics. The song Garbage Pail Kids has this weird, almost sounds like a freaking like a Vietnamese vinyl that's like on loop, and it's kind of like just looping over and over again, some weird quirk, who knows what the heck that is, and that sounds really cool and fascinating with some awesome rapping on top. And then halfway through the track you get these like some like epic alternative guitar, kind of fuzzy, just like big fuzzy guitar, shoegazy kind of come in, everything is all fuzzy, and it's just like, what a strange, interesting blend of elements. This weird sample of like Asian folk music or something like that, and then there's like this fuzzy, dark, kind of post-punky, shoegazy guitar that comes in. It's like orgasmic. Kingdom Hearts Key is another standout track that has this really beautiful acoustic, dreamy sample that's like from a J-pop song Of course, it makes sense to use J-pop, given that Kingdom Hearts is a game from Japan, so you got a nice little Japanese epicness going on. That's freaking epic. That's gonna scare the farming tools. So that's a nice lush breath of air to have this kind of dreamy acoustic guitar, pretty almost dream poppy sample in the background, and then you actually, on top of that being a breath of fresh air, where it's a little bit more like smooth and clean and pristine compared to most of this very messy, abrasive album, you even have Red Veil come on too. Red Veil, an awesome up-and-coming rapper. He's doing a great job already. So young and already so talented. Has an awesome feature in there too. So really just kind of a nice changing it up both production-wise by bringing something a little bit more airy and lush compared to a very abrasive album, and also changing it up by bringing on a feature. I do wish there were more kind of like breath of fresh air moments throughout this record. I know it's intentionally like for the sake of sticking to the scaring the farming tools concept, it's intentionally leaning in to that more abrasive, quirky, strange, sloppily mixed theme. But, you know, like I said, I think there's a reason that Kingdom Hearts Key is a fan favorite from this album for me and a lot of people. It's nice to have those moments of clarity where things are a little bit more pristine. And frankly, JPEGMAFIA's All My Heroes Are Cornballs, I think one of the things that makes that album is amazing is the production is very sleek and pristine and beautiful and crisp and clear. And I don't know, I think I kind of, you know, I like... that you have to sometimes ask, like, how much of this album is rough around the edges because that's, like, intentional, versus how much of it is rough around the edges because maybe they could have done more to improve the track and make it better and more thought out, but they kind of reached the point where they were like, this is good enough, and they talked themselves into thinking that the imperfections are actually good because it's supposed to be sloppy. It's hard to say, but when I listen to a track like Run the Jewels, where it's, like, only a minute long, and it's like, what's the point of this track? It's such a throwaway track, like, you could have expanded on it, you could have done, you know, there's like just lots of tracks throughout this album where I feel like it intentionally kind of just, or maybe unintentionally just finishes without filling out all the ideas and thoughts that it had. But like it just feels like it ends abrasively, and like the last three tracks, like the last track is, you know, I just feel like, oh, the album ended, okay, I didn't really, you know, it just feels like it just ends abrasively, like, okay, I'm not really sure what's going on here. And the thing is like, you know, I get it. You know, it's supposed to be a little rough around the edges because we're Danny Brown and we're JPEGMAFIA and we don't care because we're crazy and we do things that we don't, but we're crazy people. So we're gonna rap over a saxophone. Okay, that's great and all, but the fact that the album is called Scaring the Farming Tools is like admitting that this is a trope that's already been explored a lot. It's kind of going in acknowledging that this is not necessarily innovative, groundbreaking stuff. Like, it's kind of this weird thing where experimental music is supposed to be groundbreaking and innovative, but like it's kind of like, yes, the genre of scaring the farming tools has already been explored, and a lot of these ideas I'm hearing do sound like, okay, this kind of sounds like a similar flow or a similar beat to something I've already heard from JPEGMAFIA before. I guess it's a little bit of a mixed bag where sometimes I'm really stunned and wowed by how incredible the production is, and other times I'm like, okay, this kind of sounds like, it sounds like a JPEGMAFIA project that JPEGMAFIA was working on that was going to be his follow-up to LP, but instead of focusing more on really, you know, getting the details perfect in the production, he kind of just said, I'm going to instead just get Danny Brown to kind of do some rapping here and there on it, and it's not, it sounds like it's just like, you know, I went back and listened to the other recent JPEGMAFIA projects after this or before this, and I was like, you know, I think I prefer All My Heroes Are Cornballs. It just sounds like All My Heroes Are Cornballs is an album that JPEGMAFIA made sure to perfect. He put all the perfect little details on it, and Scaring the Farming Tools does not sound like they put the same amount of details into perfecting it. So all in all, you know, it's a little rough around the edges. Maybe intentionally, maybe not, maybe somewhat intentionally, but they kind of talked themselves into it. It doesn't feature Danny Brown as much as I would have liked. There could be background reasons for that, we don't know. Some of the tracks don't feel fleshed out as much as they could. It's a little bit inconsistent, but with all that said, it is a truly just really fun, really just a blast. Just like you gotta listen to this. It's so stimulating from start to finish. I'm being very nitpicky here, you know, just really picking out little details in the mix and the songwriting choices that I'm only really doing because if you have two experts like JPEGMAFIA and Danny Brown who are both capable of releasing like a 10 out of 10 album, you know, when they release something that feels a little bit half-baked, I'm gonna be, you know, lasering in and picking at them like that. Not groundbreaking, but it is an absolute blast. So I'm feeling like a 7.8 on this. I think it's going to be a record that a lot of experimental hip hop fans are going to really, really enjoy. I'm already seeing a lot of fighting in discourse. You don't like the mixing. No, I don't know. The mixing is supposed to be this way. What the? Yes, I'm allowed to dislike in things I don't like. You know what's scaring? You know what's scaring the farming tools? The discourse. The discourse on Twitter on Rate Your Music and everyone else who's fighting over this album. That is a way more scary than experimental hip-hop tropes that we've already heard going back a decade ago. It doesn't matter. Point is, yes, there's a freaking Pokemon card someone made of this album. That is scary. All right, whatever. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this review. Punk Revolution now.